is Ralph from Happy Dog Training, and welcome to another episode of Dog Talk. Today, we're going to talk about food aggression in dogs. And food aggression is something that happens I get called for, most dog trainers get called for quite regularly. And that is when a dog is having some issues when you try to mess with their food. They don't like it when you get near them. They don't like it when you grab the food bowl. They don't like it when you even look at them when they're eating. So there's all kinds of levels of intensity that you may be dealing with. But basically, it's a dog that takes issue with anybody while he's consuming food. So there's a couple of things to understand about food aggression that are very important. So when I was, let me start this way. When I was a really like a more inexperienced trainer, younger trainer, maybe like 5 years in or so, I thought that food aggression is always a rank issue with pets. And it can be. It's not that it couldn't, but it's certainly not always the case. It's actually most of the time not the case. But it's a possibility. So it's just one aspect of it that you may have heard about, you may have read about. So it's not that it's not couldn't be, but chances are, if you're just dealing with food aggression and not other possessive aggression on top of that, you're not dealing with something of this nature. But let's break this apart piece by piece. So when you have a dog that demonstrates food aggression, what you usually see is a dog that will fletch his teeth over his food bowl or over a bone, or he may have a low growl, he may stiffen in his body, he may lick his lips, he may take a body stance that clearly indicates like don't mess with me, or leave this alone, don't touch this. Right? So it's the body language of the dog indicates this is mine, don't mess with my food. But these are kind of the visual signals that you see. But let's talk about the different aspects. So there's basically two possibilities when you have a dog with food aggression. One is that it's a genetic predisposition, and the other is that it's a learned behavior. So let's talk about these separately because they are separate things. And one you can do something about, and the other one you can't really do anything about. So let's start with a genetic predisposition. So if a dog has a genetic predisposition to be possessive over its food, there is no training on earth that will ever change those genetics. The dog will always have that predisposition. Evolutionarily, that is a very useful trait. So being forceful in protecting your food and protecting your resources is, from an evolutionary perspective, a smart choice. So dogs that do that are actually not like misbehaving or they're off. They're completely normal. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just they are protective of their food based on their genetics. And this is not, when I say genetics, this is not breed specific. This has nothing to do with the breed of the dog. It's not like, oh, this breed is and this breed is not. No. It's a genetic markup. It's a genetic markers. Usually it's a whole bunch of them. It's not just one, right? So it's the genetics of a particular dog that make that dog protect its food with force. It's just what that is. So when you have a dog like this, a typical thing would be that the dog is only possessive over food items, bones, chewers, his food bowl, but nothing else. He doesn't mind sharing toys. He doesn't mind water. It's kind of like in between, but usually it's not including water. But he doesn't mind sharing toys or people or locations or sofas or beds or anything. Nothing else. It's just food. So the likelihood that that is a genetic predisposition is very high. And when you have such a dog, trying to embark on a training journey to change that is going to be a very frustrating endeavor because you ultimately can never be sure that that was addressed. So let's say it's a very mild form of food aggression. The dog's like in early stages of demonstrating it. He's younger and you're just like seeing it for the first couple of times. You're like, maybe hire a trainer now. It's like only 5 months old, something like that, or 4 months old. Right? And you think, maybe we can do something here. And it's very mild and low at this point. And you could go and in training, you could suppress it in the moment. So you could absolutely suppress the behavior in the moment. But you will have no guarantee that over the next bone, the next football, the next toy, next chewer, not toy, the next chewer, the dog won't do it again. You can never trust that with a dog that is actually food aggressive. Because yes, you can suppress it in one moment, but it will never generalize out into the next with a dog that has a genetic predisposition. The genetics don't change. They are just what they are. So generally, it's become accepted that most attributes of any being are a combination of genetics and the environment. It's usually a combination. The ratio of the combination, we have no idea about. Right? We don't know how much of each is what. It depends on so many things, and we don't know at this point. I've never read anything about that we actually knew. I mean, some people say it's 50-50, but I don't think that's an accurate statement at all. It really depends on what we're talking about. We're talking about eye color, that's not 50-50, right? That's genetic. We're talking about your height. It's not going to be 50-50 either. We're going to talk about your ability to learn faster. Are we talking about ability to run faster? Certain other attributes that you may have. It will vary based on all kinds of factors, but it's usually a combination. And with food aggression in dogs, it's predominantly the genetics of the animal. There's nothing you can do in raising that puppy to reduce that. It's just in there. It's just what it is. So there's these silly ideas on the internet about messing with the dog's food and stick your food hand in there and hand feed them and all this nonsense. That is more likely to make your dog food aggressive. If he wouldn't be naturally, you have a higher chance of creating that, of messing with their food. So I highly recommend you don't do that. That's a really bad idea. If a dog's eating, leave him be. Leave him alone. I don't want to be bothered while I'm eating. I'm sure you don't want to be bothered while you're eating. Let your dog eat in peace. You don't need to be taking the food bowl away midway through. You don't need to be like messing with the food or hand feeding, or don't do that. It's not a good idea. Okay? So if it's genetic predisposition, there isn't really anything training-wise you can do to trust it. Yes, we can suppress it, but we can never trust it. And based that we can never trust it, it is much smarter to manage that. So with food aggression in dogs, it's much safer to manage the situation by just having him eat in his crate. Have a safe spot for your dog where he can finish his food, nobody bothers him, and you collect the bowl after he's done and he's walked away. Same with, you want to give him a bone, you want to give him an antler, you want to give him a bully stick, same thing. Have a crate for him, make him comfortable in there. That's his bed, that's his eating place. When he eats, you close the door, nobody gets to touch him, nobody bothers him, nobody does anything to this animal, just let him finish his treat. And then when you let him out, let him walk away from the food bowl. Once he's gone, collect the remains. And that is basically the management for a food aggressive dog, if it's a genetic predisposition. And if it's the only possessiveness that we have, it's only around food, it's most likely a genetic predisposition. So when we have, on the other hand, other possessive behaviors that go along with that. So the dog is not just aggressive over his food, he also shows possessive aggression over toys and people and locations and water or whatever, right? Anything, really, it could be anything. Anything can be a resource at the end of the day. A blanket, a pillow. So then we are most likely dealing with a more general possessive aggressive issue, and that's a learned behavior. The dog has learned that through his actions he can control his resources and people will back off because he scares them, so he uses the strategy successfully to keep what it wants to keep. That's absolutely addressable in training. You can absolutely go after that in training exercises and a training program, and that can be extinguished, most likely. I mean, never, always and never are like difficult words per se. When you say always and never, you're almost always wrong, right? So, but most of the time, if you have a possessive aggressive issue that goes beyond food, you can address that. And that's worth doing because there's going to be risky scenarios. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to live with a dog like this who has these possessive-aggressive issues that are broader than food. That's tricky. So a dog that is just food-aggressive and is a genetic predisposition, these are usually fantastic dogs outside their food-aggressive behaviors. Outside of that, they're awesome. They're usually fantastic in every aspect. They play with dogs, they go to dog parks, they're great. But food, leave them alone. But with a possessive-aggressive dog, he'll fight over other stuff. Right? So he'll fight over toys and blankets and affection from people and things like that. So that's a prime training opportunity. It just has to be done correctly. It's like with everything, it has to be done correctly. But that is something you can absolutely address through training, and you should. I would recommend you do. Now, the things that you want to do is, generally speaking, when you deal with an aggressive behavior, including this aggressive behavior, is you want to teach the dog a couple of concepts. You want to teach concepts of cooperation. You want to teach concepts of let go of stuff when I tell you to, back up from things that I tell you to, understand what happens if you don't listen to me, understand the concepts of penalties if you violate my rules. You want to teach all of that to your dog as concepts outside the context of possessing things that he would take issue with and maybe go in aggressive mode for. So you want to reduce the conflict in these interactions where you teach that. And teach a couple of obedience commands, like I said, out, and maybe backing up can be helpful and things like that to deal with the behavior effectively. But ultimately, the goal of that should be to squash that, because you can usually squash that. I mean, there's scenarios where you can. Everything's individual, but most of the time, 9 out of 10 times, probably more than that, you should be able to put an end to that. So here is, however, one aspect of that you just don't know until you get started. But it doesn't really make a difference, because with possessive-aggressive behaviors, you definitely should do the training, so it's not really relevant. But you have to prepare yourself for the possibility that once you've extinguished the possessive-aggressive behavior, it is theoretically possible that that dog could still have a genetic predisposition for food aggression. It's not impossible. It's not that common. It's not that likely. It's not an indication when there's possessiveness over other things that there's also food aggression, and that's genetic. These are separate things. But you won't know for sure if you have a predisposition on food aggression on top of possessive aggression until you've squashed the possessive aggression first. So you have to deal with that and extinguish that behavior, and then you'll see, is there a food issue? Now, given how easy it is to manage a genetic predisposition towards food aggression in an animal, a crate is all really you need in the structural process of feeding, and your problem solved. So it's not really a big deal if that ends up being a remainder of the behavior you have. It's easy to do, and you can enjoy your dog. But just prepare yourself that it is possible. It's unlikely, but it's possible. So that's the distinguishing. There's a distinction between those two. So it's a genetic predisposition, and it's a learned behavior. Those are the two options that you have when you deal with food aggression in dogs. So based on that, genetic predisposition, managed with crates and the structural process of feeding. Possessive aggression, absolutely. Training, find a good trainer, and deal with it in an effective manner. So I hope that was helpful, it was informative, you got something out of it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.